Welcome to Fret Buzz, the podcast. My name is Joe McMurray.
And my name is Aaron Sefchick.
And today we have Marc Beneteau, a guitar builder from St. Thomas, Ontario, who's been building guitars for 43 years. He's with us, and we're really excited to have him and to talk about everything acoustic guitars. Welcome, Marc.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Joe.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
So we actually got in contact with you through Dustin Furlow, who was on several episodes back in the, episode 20-something, I believe?
Yeah, 20.
Yeah, so Dustin has a Beneteau guitar, which I was fortunate enough to get to play last week, and it was a super jumbo body, and it, I think, walnut.
Yeah.
Really beautiful guitar, and it sounded absolutely amazing. I can't say I've ever played anything that sounded that great.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've been looking forward to this for a long time, but as soon as I played that guitar, I was head over heels ready to talk to you.
Right.
So we have been talking about all kinds of things, but I have a bunch of questions for you about the effects of different woods and body shapes and bracings and lacquer finishes and all kinds of things I'd like to get into, but I guess we probably ought to start with a little bit of your story and how you got here. And I know you've given this in some other interviews, but we got to start at the beginning.
Okay. Well, I was born in Windsor, Ontario, and grew up listening to a lot of rock and roll. That's what I did, I think, back then. And in 1974, I was reading an article in, I think it was called Guitar Magazine or something, some kind of guitar magazine, and it was an article on John McLaughlin, and he had this hand-built guitar that he had made, and up until that time, I had never considered the idea that you could make a guitar. Like, I thought they all came from factories somewhere. And here was a guitar that was made by this young guy, and it was like this electric guitar, and it was pretty cool. But that sort of flipped the switch for me. And at that point, it was like one of those moments that I thought, I'd like to do that. I want to try and do that, you know. So I looked around. I checked around Ontario to see if I could find a place where I could learn to build guitars. And it turned out that there was a guy in Ottawa, the capital of Canada, who was giving courses. And I went up there, and it's so weird because I went to the first course. It was a class, and I had been reading my ass off. Like, I'd been reading everything I could on guitar building. And this class was, it was kind of like for hobbyists. And I was, I had my nose up in the air. That won't work. They pulled out a piece of butternut. They said, well, we'll make our guitar out of that. And at that point I thought, oh, you can't build a guitar out of butternut. It's like, that's just not good enough. So I didn't go to the class. I should have. I would have learned a lot. But I didn't go to the class, and that's how it actually started. I came back and I started hacking away. Found a place to build my guitars, and it was a spare bedroom in my house, and that was it. And I started from there, and I was able to sell my first. I sold my second guitar to a buddy, and then sold my third guitar to another buddy. That's how it starts, right? You play your first instruments, but I didn't train with anybody, so it was really a matter of trial and error, and that's basically what it's been ever since.
Well, it seems like that has worked.
It has, and it's. I think it's a good way to learn. I mean, if you make mistakes, it forces you to understand why you made the mistake, not just because somebody told you to do it a certain way, and that works for me. I've made lots of mistakes, so. Yeah.
The pain of go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, in terms, since you had said you didn't take that class with that individual, how much do you actually talk to other luthiers in terms of their techniques, and how much do you actually incorporate that, or if at all? Like,
that's. I don't know if I'm embarrassed about this or not, but I rarely talk to other builders about how they like. I don't. If I'm trying to work out a new technique, I generally work it out on my own. I have picked up a few things from other builders. There's a couple things that I can specifically think of that I saw in a video that, man, that's really good. That's a really good way of doing it. And I use that, but for the most part, I just work stuff out on my own, and I like that. I know quite a few builders, and I get to interact with them at guitar shows and stuff, but generally speaking, I kind of work it out,
Yeah, well, that makes you...
I was just going to say, because of that, my techniques and my methods of doing things may be different from the average, especially because nowadays with the internet, you're going to get a lot of people who use exactly the same technique because they all interact. They go online, this is the way you do it. And so, you see, and that's not necessarily bad, but it's just not my comfort zone, I guess.
Well, that makes you truly unique. That's for sure.
Well, in some ways, I'm sure. Yeah.
Now, weren't you influenced by Larrivee guitars?
Absolutely. This goes back to before I started building, but I had the bug had hit me and I wanted to learn. My brother, who lived in Toronto, brought me to Toronto, or I met him in Toronto, and he brought me to a really cool 70s guitar shop called the Toronto Folklore Center. And they carried cool guitars. They had Alaskan, who had just left John Larrivee, and they had Larrivee's guitar. And I had never seen anything like them because coming from Windsor, where all the influence is American, all I knew for acoustic guitars was Martins and Gibsons and, the usual suspects, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's what I thought of when I thought of an acoustic guitar. And then when I saw this Larrivee and Alaskan, but mostly the Larrivee in the Ottawa, I keep saying Ottawa because Ottawa had a folklore center as well. But in the Toronto Folklore Center, I was amazed because it looked very classical. It had wooden bindings, it had a rosette for the sound hole. It had all this stuff that I was unused to, but looked so beautifully organic and really, really cool. And they actually had it in a display case under glass, So it was like, this is special, And so at the time, I was just really influenced. And my first guitars look a lot like Larrivee guitars. I designed a rosette and learned how to make the rosette and stuff like that. So they actually look quite a bit like Larrivees. I even braced them like Larrivees at that time. That didn't last very long. But.
So that's a perfect time to transition, I think, into the ideas of bracing.
Yeah.
Or the concept of bracing. And it seems like typically acoustic guitars have an X brace.
Right.
And that X meets a few inches behind the bridge. Is that correct?
Yeah, it meets sort of between the bridge and the sound hole. Closer.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so what you want to do is, and I don't want to get very technical here, but what happens basically is that X crosses, and then in the lower bout, the two arms of the X brace, the two braces sort of go under the wings of the bridge, and that helps transmit the what do you call those things? Vibrations, yeah.
Yeah. So why, I mean, it seems like there are lots of options for bracing. Totally. And X bracing is probably the most common, it seems like.
Yeah.
But what are benefits to using something like, I've heard of like this fan bracing that spreads out from the tailpiece, and the ladder bracing like in classical guitars, and even Taylor's new V-class bracing.
Yeah. That you mean that new Taylor bracing you're talking about? Is that what you're talking about? Okay. A friend of mine, an amateur builder, is playing around with that. I've never used that one, and I would assume that Taylor has done their homework. I mean, they're a pretty competent company, and so they must have an idea. I actually have never heard a Taylor guitar with that bracing in it, so I can't comment on that. The only bracing I use, because I'm strictly a steel string builder now, I've built some classicals in the past and a couple arch tops, but generally I'm a steel string flat top builder. And so I've stuck with the X brace. I vary it, both in the size of the bracing and the positioning and stuff, to some extent, depending on the model and the guitar, what it's made of, and what the customer wants, because that's a big part of it. If a customer is looking for a certain kind of sound or a certain feel, then I work with that to try and get it close to for them.
Mm-hmm. So have you played a guitar with this fan bracing?
No, well, no, I'm not even aware. Are you talking about like a classical fan?
I think that's what I'm
Okay.
no expert in this. That's why I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, I'm not aware of. I'm sure there are some because there's experimentation, and especially with, I would say, possibly younger builders who are just trying everything.
Mhm.
I don't see why some of them wouldn't try a classical based fan brace, which is, where you've got the fans kind of splaying out in the lower bout. Okay. And I'm not sure. I mean, I've never tried that, and I'm not even aware of any steel string guitars that have that kind of bracing. So, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Fair enough. So, moving on to body shapes.
Okay.
I'm more of a rock guy turned jazz.
Okay.
Recently I've had this obsession with acoustic playing, and Don Ross is I love Don's playing. I love Andy McKee and Tommy Emmanuel and all those guys.
Yeah.
I love Dustin Furlow's playing and Matt Thomas's playing.
Yeah.
So I've been really into this, and like before I had a Martin OM
Okay.
style guitar that I like the body shape, but I think that one was just something wasn't right about that guitar. And I've recently traded for a Taylor C or 414 CE, which suits me well, but there are so many different body shapes, and
Right.
I'm thinking about our listenership, the general population of guitarists and musicians. It would be nice to discuss why you have different body shapes, what the benefits are of different body shapes.
Sure.
I mean, some of it's obvious, but
Mhm.
what's your take on all of this?
Okay. Well, you came to the right place because I actually offer everything from a O size, parlor size, all the way up to an SJ, and that includes quite a few different models. The smaller models are really good for fingerstyle playing, and they tend to have a very focused voice. Like it's like I don't know how to describe it, but it's the voice is very solid in the middle. You don't have low lows, but you've got that every note seems to have a really nice body to it. And then as you get bigger, you spread that out. And the OM, which is like I've got the O, the double O, and the OM, and the OM is kind of like a great fingerstyle guitar. It's kind of you can do all kinds of things with it. Then you go up to what I call my full size guitars. So the OM is a 15-inch lower bout. You go up from that and you get into 16-inch guitars, which I call my standard models, because what they do, I've got three in that basic width, and I call them my do everything guitars. Like they're great for use them for fingerstyle. You can use them for strumming, because they've got enough depth to them for all kinds of play. And then you get up to the SJ, which is the biggest guitar I build, and it's just got a big booming voice, and and it's well suited for certain players. Now, there's no rules in this because there's no reason why you couldn't use a parlor guitar for strumming. It'll still work great, but there's generalities that you can play around with, and but again, there's no rules. So if I find out and also it's also ergonomic, because if some people just don't feel comfortable with a larger body size, so you go to a smaller body size, and you can vary the body size, or you can vary the depth of the body to help to tweak the sound as well.
Okay. So I have an old 12 fret Martin Dreadnought.
Oh yeah, nice.
And it's from 1971 or 72.
Oh, this is the one I had.
It's what?
I had my first guitar. It was a Martin D18S. Is what.
Okay. Well, this one, so it's not the same guitar, but yeah, it's similar. This is a 32. But yeah, so it's got so much extra volume between the sound hole and the the body, the fretboard end of the body.
Right.
The voice is, it's got an enormous voice because of that.
Yeah. You got mine well. That was my first good guitar. And I didn't realize it was an oddball until I got it. I bought it at a store in Detroit. And I have always felt funny. As a matter of fact, that's the reason why I've actually built, I have a mold for that body size, because I really liked it. I built a few of those over the years. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got a really different sound, which is cool. I have a hard time not having access to the frets above the 12th fret. That's
right.
Difficult for me.
Well, back in 1970, that wasn't an issue, was it?
Right.
Yeah. You didn't have, these things were made for strumming mainly, or for fingerstyle playing, but not going up the neck part.
Right.
So why did they put the slotted headstock on there?
I think it's tradition. There's no technical reason to put a slotted headstock on, as far as I'm concerned. I've done lots of guitars with both, and for me, I put a slotted headstock on a guitar that, unless the customer wants it for some other reason, I will put a slotted headstock on a model that looks traditional. So I put it on my O, my double O, my triple O. Especially, I do a triple O 12 fret. So the 12 fretters look vintage, and so what I do with those is I put a slotted head if it's okay. It's more of a pain to change the strings, of course, but and that may be a factor for some people, but it just looks neat,
Yeah, I didn't know if it helped spread, because if you have a wider nut width, I didn't know if it had something spreading the strings out without having to pull them towards the. I don't know.
No, I don't. Maybe theoretically that's true, but I haven't really noticed anything like that. Yeah, so you're talking about the wider neck width as well as the slotted headstock.
Yes, mine has an inch and 7/8, so it's really wide.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. That's true. Yeah. No, I don't necessarily, when I'm doing that model, and I've only done 2 or 3 of them, but when I'm doing that model, I don't. The neck width is up to the customer. I don't necessarily stick, and that brings me to another point. I don't have models with very specific specs on them. I don't do my guitars that way. I've noticed a lot of builders have a model, and they might even have a name for it, and it comes with these specs, and this is what you get. Right. Whereas mine is more like ordering a car, and then you can add on whatever things you want to it. So we start with a basic body shape, and then virtually everything after that is variable depending on what the customer works out, or what they want, or what I work out with the customer.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'd imagine there's a lot of education you have to do with your customers.
Yeah, in a lot of cases there are, and sometimes they want me to do something that I know is not a good idea. So I have to put my foot down sometimes, because my name's on the guitar. So if the customer is asking for a specific design idea or aesthetic idea, and I'm thinking, that's not gonna work out. That's not gonna look. I'm not gonna be okay with that. Then I will steer them elsewhere. I'll offer options or alternatives, just to make sure that And if they're insisted on it, then I have to send them somewhere else. That doesn't happen very often, though.
I will say, after watching your studio tour, which I recommend everybody go watch, because it was a great. I loved seeing all your machinery and all the things and all the tools that you work with. I mean, I just sat there with my jaw dropped, going, "Oh, that looks like a whole lot of fun."
Small one-person shop, but
Yeah. But in seeing that, I did see that you have, and I've never actually seen this before, but you incorporate like an armrest that actually kind of bevels the top of the guitar. That's beautiful. That's absolutely, I think that's just a wonderful piece of almost like artwork that you incorporate into the body of the guitar. It's just beautiful.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because these design details are both aesthetic and functional. Okay. Right. And the armrest is something that's actually fairly widespread now, but when I started, obviously didn't exist at all. The first one I saw was my friend Grit Laskin, who he developed this armrest. We call it the Laskin armrest. It's a scallop armrest, which I'll show you. This is my own guitar, and can you see the armrest there on the side right here?
Yeah.
Okay, that's Alaskan armrest right there, and I started building that one about 15. Oh, sorry. I should look at the screen. I started building that one about 15 years ago, and more recently, there's another one, another style. It's called the Ryan, after Kevin Ryan, who developed an armrest that's actually a long sweeping scallop that runs from the waist all the way around to the tail.
Oh wow!
And that's really cool. And I do that one a lot more now. That's the most popular one. But it's become almost universal. It's almost rare now that I build a guitar without the armrest, because it's a no-brainer. Every guitar player, regardless whether he's actually seen one before, immediately gets what it's about. It's just much more comfortable. And the bigger the guitar, the more comfortable that armrest is, because you've got, you're reaching around the body, right?
Yeah.
On the very small guitars, it's not necessary, and I don't do it as much on, say, the parlor guitars or anything. But so it becomes both a function and a really cool aesthetic thing. And the aesthetics is very important to me. I want to make sure that everything works together on an instrument.
Right.
I recorded something last weekend on my acoustic guitar, and I was probably sitting in front of this microphone for 4 or 5 hours, and I got up and I had an actual like a red arc across my chest from where the guitar was digging in, and I was wishing I had that bevel. It would have been so much more comfortable.
Oh yeah. That's true. Yeah, it's really been that's one of the best design changes that's happened in acoustic guitars in the last couple decades, for sure.
Do you think that those bevels, are they difficult to put in, and do you think there's a loss of structural integrity because of them?
They are complicated. It's not a simple matter, at least the way I do it. And again, we go back to this idea that I worked all this stuff out myself. Maybe there's a really easy way to do it, but it definitely doesn't affect the structural integrity, because that bevel is, if you look inside a guitar, look inside your acoustic guitar, and there's this lining around the inside, between the side and the back, and the side and the top, and it's called kerf lining, and it's like a curved piece of wood that goes around. Well, where you have the bevel, there's none of that. What I put in is I put in a solid piece of, like a bigger solid piece around there to back up that bevel, that scallop. And it's carved away, so most of it is carved away, but still it's more substantial than the normal kerf lining, and so it's quite strong. Now, there's no loss of strength there at all. But what I do get asked is, does it cut down on the sound, because it's a bigger piece and it's encroaching on the top? And I haven't detected any loss of sound between a guitar that has that and the other. It's around the edge, so it doesn't seem to impede the vibration of the top, as long as you don't overdo the backing. If you don't make it too heavy, it seems fine. Like I can't honestly say that I've noticed a difference in the response between one with a bevel and one without.
Okay, my next question follows closely. How much, I mean, I don't want to get into how much each guitar costs, but if I was to have a guitar, the option between like the exact guitar behind you or the exact guitar without the bevel, how much does that bevel cost me?
What's the upcharge?
Yeah.
For me, the upcharge on the bevel is $500.
Okay. So it is a significant increase, but it's a significant
increase. Awesome. It's a significant amount of work. I mean, it's quite labor intensive. I find that, again, it doesn't seem to be a deterrent, and I have no problem with building a guitar without it. I don't have no problem with building, a plain guitar without any options, because I just love guitars, and they're all nice, in their own way, as long as they're all aesthetically beautiful and nice instruments. But Yeah, so it's $500 for the bevel. For the back bevel, I do what's called a rib rest as well, and it's more work than the top one. So it's $750. And actually, to be honest, I don't get many calls for that one.
Right.
I get many more. I get tons of calls for the top one, but not that much for the back one.
So the rib rest is what I needed last weekend.
You did. It's going to cost you more. It's going to cost you. By the way, I don't do a guitar with just a rib rest and no top, so you're stuck with the
both.
$1,250 extra.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I imagine though, once you play it, it's
that money just fades away.
Yeah. And truly, when you see it, I mean, like I said, when I saw your video, it is a piece of work. It's artwork. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
What about the hole in the top bout so that you can hear the guitar better?
Yeah.
Tell us about those. What goes into it? What, all the same details. I want to know how much that costs and how much it affects the structural integrity and everything else.
Okay, it's right away. I'll tell you, the cost is $250.
Okay,
we're getting down here. Eh? It's not that bad.
Yeah.
But okay, so here's the thing: the sound port acts like a monitor speaker, and you've probably all experienced an acoustic guitar where if you're standing or if you're sitting in front of the guitar, you hear the guitar a lot more. You hear the fidelity of the guitar a lot better than if you were playing the guitar, because the sound's coming out the front, out the sound hole.
Yeah.
The sound port helps you hear that. It just comes right up to your ear, so you get a better feel. You get more of a sense of the guitar's true tone with the sound port. It's just nice, and I offer what I call that. It's like a plug. It's a port cover. It just kind of slides into the port. Most people don't use that, but now back to the structural integrity thing. I could caution any builders out there who have not done a port, don't just cut a hole in the side of your guitar. And no matter how nice it is, you're asking for trouble, because that back, it has to be reinforced. So what I do is, prior to cutting the port itself, I fit a very thin patch of veneer. Well, it's actually solid wood, but it's almost veneer thickness, and it's with the grain going the opposite direction of the sides. So what it does is, even like a very, very small one, I'm going to say a 32nd of an inch thick, is plenty to totally reinforce that side. And then when you cut the port out, the port hole out, you don't have to worry about it breaking, because it's been reinforced.
How do you cut the hole? With like a hole saw?
No, I use a router. I have a template and a router for those who understand that kind of thing. I made a fixture, just like my shop is full of fixtures, and I made a fixture that the side, this is before the sides are attached to the top and back. I forgot to do that one time, and I had to put it in after the fact, so I had to design a whole new method of doing it after the fact, after the sides and top, or the back and top. But what I do is I have a fixture that clamps the side into this fixture, and it has a hole in it, and you can get a guide for a template for a router that will follow that hole. And so, not to get too technical, but the actual cutting is incredibly quick. It takes me about 40 seconds or so to cut the hole, but the setup is the whole thing. And then the interior reinforcement, that has to be fitted just right and everything. So, and pre-bent. So it's like it's all prep and a tiny bit of cutting.
Have you played with the size of that hole in terms of the diameter and how that affects the sound that comes out?
Not really. I started out with the shape being different, but I've stayed with more or less a consistent size, and I find that it works fine. I don't think changing the sound, I mean, you can only change it so much, because again, I'm back to aesthetics. I don't want it to look really out of place. Okay, right. So I try to keep it so that it looks aesthetically right, and it functions fine for what I want. It does exactly what I want. And I can't from experience, I can't think that if I changed it a bit, you know, if I didn't change it radically, I don't think that could make much of a sound difference. I don't see where that would happen. So yeah, I haven't experimented too much with it. I think it's, you know, it's working for me as it is.
Yeah.
Do you think there's sound loss from the front side if some of the sounds leaving through the side?
Number one question. And no, I have not, because you can actually plug the hole to hear it. And it just, you'd think the sound must be leaking out of that little hole and taking it away from the big hole, but it doesn't. It doesn't work that way.
Huh. I guess the top's still vibrating, how it's going to vibrate. And
yep, absolutely.
I really, really like the port. I think that was part of why I walked away from playing Dustin's Beneteau guitar, feeling like I did. I was so down on my Taylor after that.
Well, take your Taylor and just get your hacksaw out.
Yeah, I need to just cut a little port on my Taylor. No, but I think that might have been one of the bigger things that the factors that I need to take into account, that it sounds so much better when you're the actual player and you have that port.
Oh yeah.
It's louder and it's clear, and it's really an amazing feature.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you put your ear close to the body and you can hear better. Well, that's sort of what's happening there too. It's just coming up to you in a way that it normally doesn't.
Yes, I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah.
Can we talk about fan frets?
Sure.
So when did fan frets come about? How recent of an innovation is that?
I don't know.
The first time I ever saw it was Andy McKee playing Driftin' on YouTube.
Okay.
And I'm not like I hadn't been involved in that scene, so it probably existed before then, but.
Yeah, I don't know when it first came up. I remember when I first became aware of it was probably 15 years ago. And I didn't know much about it. It's a little weird to me, you know, but here's how it started for me, is that, and this has happened before, it's like I've been building guitars for Don Ross since 1997. And what happens is some of the innovations, some of the things that I've done, including the bevel and the port, came about because somebody asked for it. And generally, here's how it generally works. Somebody asks for something that I haven't done before, and I go, oh God, you know, yeah, you know, I don't know, you know, kind of thing. And then I go through a period of thinking about it, mulling about it, and then I go, oh, you know what? That might be kind of, I think I'm going to give that a try. So, you know, that's how they kind of happen. And this happened with the fan fret. I was at a concert with Don, and he said, you know, have you ever done a fan fret? I said, oh God. And so I you know, no, I haven't done a fan fret. So, you know, eventually it came out that I tried a fan fret. And that was a bit tricky because there's a lot of things about building a fan fret that you don't have to deal with in building a regular scale guitar. Yeah. And so it's taken, like, I've built a lot of them since then. That was probably 10 years ago anyway. And I've built quite a few of them. But, and I'm always working on ways to improve. Like, this has been my building thing anyway since the beginning, is that, you know, even if I've done stuff in the past, I'm constantly working on how to do it better, more efficiently, you know, building tooling that helps me get there faster. And the fan fret, I had to do a bunch of tooling to help me be really accurate, because the fan fret is really tricky in terms of bridge position, because, and again, I won't get too technical here, but with a regular scale guitar, what you do is the scales are 90 degree to the string, so you can I was going to say this, you can, if you narrow the strings, it doesn't make any difference to the scale length. But with a fan fret, because the bass string is longer. The more you go to the center, the scale actually gets shorter. And with the treble, it's the opposite. When you move a string over closer to the center of the fingerboard, the string gets, what is it? Oh yeah, it gets shorter, and I don't know. It gets longer. Okay, so if you're trying to figure out where to put your bridge, you have to know exactly where that string's going to be in order to get the scale position that you want. So it's tricky. You don't measure it from the outside of the fingerboard. You have to measure it from exactly where the strings are going to sit on the board. And the wider the neck, that changes everything. So it's there's some tricky parts about doing a fan fret. Anyway, that's how I learned. So that's in place now, and they work well. But there's a number of things that you have to kind of take into consideration when you're doing it.
Wow.
Including the bracing. The bracing is different on a fan fret because, well, I won't get into that, but it's definitely different.
I assume the tensions are different.
The tensions are different, yeah, for sure, because the longer the scale, going down to the bass strings. But that's good for response because a longer string will respond better to a lower note. In a normal scale, it's a big compromise, because like look at a piano. If you look at a piano, the bass strings are really long, the treble strings are really short, and that's optimum for how they respond. So with a regular scale guitar, even though it doesn't matter much because I play a regular scale guitar. I could have built myself a fan fret, but they're fine. They've been fine for forever. But a fan fret probably is just a little better for that, especially for drop tuning and for alternate tunings and things like that.
Never actually thought about it that way, but yes.
They're actually, yeah, I was going to say they're actually it's surprisingly natural to play as well. Even though you look at it and you go, that's got to be weird. Yeah. It's going to take a while to adjust to this thing. It's like, that's what, as long as your fan isn't hugely wide. Like I don't believe in these fans that are the treble strings really, really short and the bass strings really long. I've never gone there. I keep it pretty reasonable, and so it's very playable. Works really well.
I really want to play one of those.
Yeah, so
you should. There's not a ton of them out there, but they're out there, and I know I've built quite a few of them.
It's not like you can go to Guitar Center and they have a fan fret there for you to
not usually
test out.
No, that's right. And there are electric ones out there too, though I don't know much about who's building those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you, with the edges of the frets, do you have to do anything to keep that from? I mean, I guess you just polish. I'm looking at my guitar over here. Sometimes as the seasons change in some cheaper guitars, the wood
fret sticks out.
Yeah, the wood, I guess, expands or contracts based on the weather and the humidity differently than the metal frets do, and so sometimes you end up with that kind of sharp edge.
Yeah, that points to the fact that the metal doesn't move and the wood does, and all wood does move to some extent. For a repairman, it's pretty good clue if he feels a guitar that has the fret ends all sticking out. It means the guitar got too dry, or the fingerboard wasn't seasoned properly in the first place. If it's the guitar's properly built with well seasoned wood, that shouldn't happen unless it's put into an environment where it shouldn't be. Generally too dry, right? It's not going to happen if it's too humid, but too dry, that fingerboard will shrink and you'll feel those fret ends.
Right.
That's a clue, but it shouldn't happen on a seasonal basis for sure, unless there's something wrong with the guitar, I would think.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I do in a case like that is you have to file those ends and reshape the tips, and that's not a big deal, but there's you have to find out why it happened in the first place.
My my Gibson ES335 has a it has, I love that guitar. It's my main gigging guitar, but it has these little there's a binding on the edge of the fretboard.
That's right.
That actually comes up and creates a perfectly smooth edge.
Right.
So that you're actually you never touch the metal.
Yeah, that's right. Right. That's a different technique. There's two ways to do it. The Gibson way of doing that was to put the frets in, and I don't know what technique they used to do it, but it was cut off right where the binding starts, and then the binding was put on, and so you're right, like the binding goes up, but the fret doesn't reach the tip of the edge of the fingerboard. Whereas the way I do it, and I think probably most acoustic guitars, that seems more of a factory thing, but most acoustic guitars that I'm aware of, and probably a lot of electrics, the bindings are put on the fingerboard, and then the fret is put in with the ends are notched a little bit so that the head or the fret crown extends over the side, and then that's all trimmed back. But the fret then ends up going right to the edge of the board. And yeah, it works fine, as long as things are okay.
I didn't know if, especially when I'm playing a lot of rock, I dig in pretty hard, and I tend to wear my frets down. Like I've had to have my Stratocaster's been refretted, my other 335 style guitar, my old one's been refretted. I didn't know if because I've only had this one since last September, so I didn't know if that was going to be an issue when I went to, if 5 years from now I need to get it refretted. Is that difficult?
That's an interesting question. I've done some repairs, not many, but I've done some repairs over the years, and I don't think I've ever had to refret like your Gibson, and I don't know how your average repairman would deal with that, because it'd be a little tricky to take those old frets out and make the new frets exactly so they'd slot right into, inside the binding. I'm not sure. They might. What you could do is you could take the old frets out and then convert it to the other way, which would be easy to do, and just have the fret ends extend to the outer edge and then clean them up that way. That would be an easy way to deal with it, but it might offend some purists. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe I just need to practice on my other guitars so I don't wear out my nice one.
Right.
Do you make any, or have you made any more than 6 strings, like a 7-string or maybe a harp guitar or something like that?
Yeah. I built a 7-string for Craig D'Andrea, and that was an interesting project, because I had to try and figure out the bracing, for that extra string, and the neck width and everything. And also the other thing is when you build, I built 2 7-strings. I built one for Terry Tufts, this really good guitar player up here in Canada. And he originally asked for the high string to be the 7th string, which is different, because I think generally the low string is the added string, right?
Yeah, yes.
Whereas with his, it was tricky. And the problem was I wasn't building fan frets at the time. This was a good 15 to 20 years ago. If with a fan fret, the problem became that high string was a G, and it was still at the normal, say, 25/4 scale length. So tuning a 25/4 scale length up to G, you're really tightening that guy. You got to put a fairly fine string on there. Yeah. And that was always a problem for him. So I don't know how we dealt with it. I ended up having to change the neck on it. But it never really worked out that way. If with a fan fret, it could have made the fan so that the high string was really short, more suitable to a G, and then the low string would be, whatever. But that didn't exist in those days for me, so that didn't work out. Now with Craig's, it was actually a fan fret. It's a fan fret, and the lower string was a below the E. So can't remember what it was, maybe a B or C or something. But that worked out a lot better because, it was a fan fret, so I could make that lower string longer, and it worked out.
Right.
Yeah. And harp guitar, I built a harp guitar. Remember what I was saying about when somebody asked me to do something different, and I go, oh, God. Here you go. That was Don again.
And is that the one that he just brought into you to get repaired last week?
Yeah, the head broke off. It's looking really good, by the way. I've got it in the spray booth. It's all repaired, and it's being resprayed, so that's worked out. But that was a perfect example of say, yeah, have you ever built a harp guitar? And I'm like, that's a big job. So I thought about it, mulled it over, did my usual thing, and decided to have a go. Of course, for Don, I mean, he's been really good for my career. So I'm happy to have a go at it for him.
Yeah.
And it was a huge learning experience because I'd never built one before. So I had a lot of R&D. It took me 2 years from the time he asked me to the time it was finished. And it's worked out really well. And it's a bit of an oddball because it is a fan fret. So those contrabass strings are really long. It's like, really. And but he loves it. Like, he likes those. He's the first guitar I built for him. It was another one. It was a baritone. Like, I had never built a baritone. And in 1997, he approached me to build a baritone. So, right from the beginning, he likes those deep sounding guitars, and he always plays an SJ model. So with a fan fret harp guitar, I mean, it was interesting. It was a very big body, very deep sound, very full. And it worked out great. Of course, there's, when you build something for the first time, you have all kinds of ideas of how you approach the second one.
Right.
Which I haven't done yet. Nobody's asked me to build another one, but if it happens, it'll happen.
What about like a microtonal type thing?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah, where on the it wouldn't be a regular fretboard where every fret is lined up, and you actually have microtones in between.
Oh, I think I'm in one of those "oh my god" moments.
Probably, yes.
No idea. Don't ask me to build one of those.
Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I unfortunately I have not. Yeah, I'm not really knowledgeable about that at all. Have you played one?
I've seen them. I've never actually played one. They're a little bit different because they're not based on half step increments.
Right.
They're more along the lines of like quarter steps.
Wow.
Yeah.
That would be a learning curve to learn to play one of those.
Indeed. Yes. I didn't know with all the people that come your way. I don't know if anybody had actually asked.
Thankfully, nobody's asked me.
Maybe I shouldn't have said anything. I'll edit that out. Don, I'm sure, is like, He's
gonna ask me.
And once again, that is where we're going to end it for today. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget, you can also go over to the Fret Buzz the Podcast YouTube channel, subscribe there, and check out our library of discussions and various topics. If you'd like to support Fret Buzz the Podcast, head on over to patreon.com and check out the levels of support and become part of the team of Fret Buzz the Podcast. Also, we are coming up on the end of the month, so I do want to remind everybody that we do have the Fret Buzz the Podcast live YouTube songwriting club. That'll be on the 31st, so in about a week. So by all means, head over to fretbuzzthepodcast.com and join. If you have a song that you would like us to listen to, go over to the website there and hit the submit button. We'd love to hear your stuff. And lastly, if you could do me a favor, if you're really enjoying the material that you're listening to, head on over to iTunes and give us a review. Let everybody know why you like the show. I think that takes care of everything. If you enjoyed, leave a comment down below. Let us know how we're doing. Other than that, we'll see you next Thursday for part 2 with Marc Beneteau of Beneteau Guitars on Fret Buzz, the podcast. See you next week.